They missed one. You sign for the package without thinking. The illegible kinked line inscribed on the liquid crystal screen with an awkward index finger bears no resemblance to your actual signature, but the delivery man seems satisfied. Before you know it, he's gone, and you're left on the threshold, holding a nondescript cardboard box. Mildly intrigued, you slit the tape with a kitchen knife and prise open the lid, finding within a hand-typed letter and a handheld dictaphone buried in a mass of packing peanuts. A sticker on the device advises you to read the letter first, then play me. Setting it aside for the moment, you unfold the neatly creased paper and read. You don't know me, but I know you. Or rather, I know of you. We have a mutual friend, you see, who I won't name here for the sake of their privacy and security. Suffice to say, she trusts you, and that's good enough for me under the circumstances. The dictaphone that accompanies this note contains sensitive information. Information that the public must be made aware of. Information that certain parties will stop at nothing to keep hidden. But I'm rushing to the finish. Let me step back a bit. In order for this to make any sense, you're going to need some context. My name is irrelevant. I'm a documentary filmmaker, or at least I was. Back in the early 2000s, a freak weather incident swept across the state of Utah, wrecking several ranches and homesteads, and wiping from the map the little desert town of Freeborn. The storm claimed numerous victims. There were disappearances and deaths, and many more who subsequently developed peculiar side effects to the trauma, behavioral issues and memory defects that medical officials ascribed to instances of PTSD brought on by the ordeal. I was hired to make a documentary film, an expose focused on the calamitous night of the storm and its harrowing aftermath. The client was unknown to me, and I now believe they were representatives of some kind of government special access program. My business was struggling, and they had money. They offered to pay me way over the odds for the production, and I was disinclined to ask questions. They did, however, insist on certain contractual obligations. I had to work to their shooting script, which pursued a tight line of questioning, clearly conceived to portray a specific narrative. They also insisted that once shooting was complete, all raw footage was to be delivered to them unedited. They would edit the film themselves, though I was promised full credit. My background had led me to adopt an investigative approach to my filmmaking. Following a story wherever it led in faithful pursuit of the truth was first principle. Here was a taut narrative that I was bound by contract to adhere to. It ran against the grain for me, but I needed the cash, so I set my principles aside and I took the job. In the main, my clients got exactly what they wanted. A sensational yet ultimately bland and disappointingly inconclusive documentary, comprised largely of sweeping vistas of wreckage overlaid with a melodramatic voiceover, and intercut with a string of bland interviews. The locals I spoke to seemed oddly vague, though genuine enough in their convictions, their stories syncing up almost too perfectly. It all seemed to make sense, and yet, as I worked, a nagging doubt took root in my mind. I began to suspect that something lay hidden beneath the bland uniformity of the local people's tales, that some crucial piece of the puzzle was missing. There was certainly something oddly disturbing about their listless demeanour, about their eerily hypnotic adherence to the story they repeated, each recantation matching the rest almost word for word. I was approached out of the blue by an unknown figure some time after completion of principal shooting. The man claimed to be an eyewitness of the events of that night, and he made it plain that he wished to tell his story, though he wished to remain anonymous, refusing the presence of a camera at our meeting and insisting that I record the interview via audio only. The resultant recording, contained on the dictaphone that now resides in your possession, was never presented to the client and has never been aired. I had felt throughout production that something was amiss. The testimony of this new witness now shed a grotesque new light on the matter, casting the shadow of conspiracy across the whole incident, and sharpening my vague suspicions into a concise theory of secret government intrigue, military-funded biogenetic research, and an alphabet agency cover-up. The man who gave that interview has since dropped out of sight, and I fear they may have finally caught up with him. I fear they may come for me next. That's why I've entrusted these materials to you, in the hope that you'll find a way to bring this story to the public. The letter ends abruptly, without the formality of a signature, and you're left bemused, yet intrigued, wondering how you ended up embroiled in this, and half convinced that the whole thing is a prank. Shrugging your shoulders, you set the letter aside and retrieve the dictaphone from its box. Firmly depressing the play button, you sit back to listen, not without a degree of trepidation, as the tape begins to roll.
There was lightning that night. A lot of lightning. I don't know if that's significant, but somehow I kinda get the feeling it was connected to what happened later. The thunderheads were gathering all afternoon away east, over Mount Albert and the Rockies. The storm broke just before sundown. That storm was a monster, like a living thing, a great boiling black colossus that stalked westward on crooked, flickering legs that lit its black underbelly as I crossed the border into Utah just before midnight. I'd never seen a storm like it, and I grew up in Oklahoma. I kept ahead of it in the truck, surfing the high-pressure front at the bow of that roiling maelstrom, following the desolate concrete strip of the I-70, hurtling headlong into the dark. It had been hot and oppressively close all day, and with it came that pent-up tension that sets your nerves on edge. That claustrophobic blanket of heat persisted into the night. The air conditioning had expired inexplicably earlier in the day. Inside the truck, it was sweltering, sweat beading on my hairline, trickling down the back of my neck, soaking my shirt. At some point between Green River and Salina, I stopped for gas. What happened next has haunted me ever since. I still can't decide if it was real or some kind of an hallucination, some sort of mental aberration brought on by the exhaustion of my drive. But I don't believe that either. Whatever it was I saw was real, though I freely admit I can't explain it. It began with an intermittent measured vibration in the ground at my feet as I waited for the truck's tank to fill. Looking back, I suppose I put it down to a mild geological tremor. To this day, I have no idea whether that region of the States is prone to earthquake activity. It was just a logical conclusion accepted by a tired mind. It was a logical assumption, but it was wrong. Very wrong. Look, I know what comes next is gonna sound insane. You don't have to believe me. Hell, I probably wouldn't believe it if it hadn't happened to me. Whether you believe me or not, it doesn't make all that much difference. The fact is, everything I'm telling you is God's honest truth. I swear. I didn't see the thing till it was almost on top of me. All I know is that it was huge, and that it was alive. An immense, lumbering something, unlike anything I or anyone else had ever seen. It appeared out of the benighted desert, its vast form half glimpsed in the darkness, looming like a god over the fragile little gas station where I stood, exposed in full sight of it in the bright pool of illumination created by the gas station lights. I was too dumbfounded to be afraid, too awestruck to move, watching it in startled fascination as seemingly oblivious to my presence, the hulking mass lumbered past, by mere chance sparing me and the gas station from the fate that was soon to befall the nearby motel, whose low sprawl nestled across the median strip from where I stood. Who knows what obscure consciousness flickered within the mind of that thing, what impulses directed it. Perhaps it conceived some sort of threat in the gaudy neon advertising sign that read, Frank's Motel, vacancy, TV in room, heated pool. That sign was certainly the initial target for its devastating ire. One massive foot smashed the sign flat, its awful impact leaving a sparking skeleton of twisted metal behind as the limb was lifted ponderously to strike a devastating blow at the motel building itself. An alarm sounded distantly, its shrill note pathetically ineffectual against the inexorable onslaught of that impossible monstrosity. People appeared, streaming from the building in panic. Tiny they seemed at that distance, their screams equally puny and remote. I watched them scatter like birds in sudden flight as the thing's great saurian neck swept down towards them, bringing its unseen face close to the ground. My own view of what happened next was obscured by the great bulk of the thing itself, but I have a grave suspicion that those people were consumed. I saw, or thought I saw, a multitude of thick tentacles emerge from its gaping maw. Just what those tentacles did, one can only guess, but afterward, when the great head was lifted high, the space where that scattering crowd of people had been was devoid of life. A near-deafening roar tore the sky just then, as the first of the army helicopters scudded in low over my head. Instinctively, I dropped to a crouch behind the truck, as the thunder of the rotors was augmented by the sudden strident rip of heavy gunfire. The creature reacted, bucking in pain, as a hot lash of tracer rounds peppered its hide high on the shoulder and neck. The thing flinched, turning away from the source of its pain, its vast bulk moving off into the dark desert, leaving smoking destruction in its wake. The helicopter banked in pursuit, a squadron of similar machines following its lead. The roar of their engines and the probing beams of their searchlights dwindling gradually away into the night. I was left stunned and amazed, and in silence as the furor abated almost as swiftly as it had begun, uncertain as to what I'd seen, whether or not it had been real or some kind of waking dream. The shattered motel was real, though, and the vast crater-like footprint that barred the exit from the gas station was real. The road section beyond it pulverized into a deep depression edged with shattered concrete. Numb and confused and acting automatically, I detached the fuel nozzle from the truck and replaced it robotically into its cradle on the pump. I even swiped my credit card to pay for the fuel. That was when I noticed the army truck pulling into the parking lot of that ruined motel. They were met by several people breaking from cover at their arrival. I saw them rounded up at gunpoint, handcuffed, and ushered into a prison truck. It didn't take me long to work out what was going on. They were rounding up witnesses. What they were doing with those witnesses was anyone's guess, but I didn't want to hang around to find out. I hopped into the truck and split. I got the hell out of there. Avoiding the highway, I took a deserted little desert road south, and I never looked back. I rolled into LA a couple of days later, having spent 2 nights out under the stars. I didn't sleep. I didn't dare. I just kept thinking about what I'd seen, about that thing, and all those people. I wasn't sure what was real and what wasn't. I drove myself half mad with doubt, half convinced that I'd imagined the whole thing, and that somehow my sanity was slipping away. It wasn't. My mind was intact. But my life was over just as assuredly as it would have been had I been sucked up into the jaws of that creature. I'd left traces, you see. As soon as I swiped my credit card at the gas pump, my fate was sealed. I wish to God I hadn't done that. That one thoughtless little everyday action ruined my life. They knew who I was, knew I'd been there, knew what I'd seen, knew that I was a loose end they could not leave for fear of it unraveling their carefully orchestrated cover-up. I emptied my accounts at a branch in Las Vegas before they had chance to block them. That kind of thing isn't too uncommon in that town, and no one at the bank seemed surprised at my request. After that, I ditched my old life. It was the toughest thing I've ever done, but it only brought me a temporary reprieve. They're onto me, I'm certain of that. That's why I wanted to share my story. These people, they'll stop at nothing to tie up this last remaining loose end, no matter where or who the trail finally leads to. Open up! This is the police!
You have been listening to They Missed One, episode 20 of Savage Bites, with me, Christian Bravery. I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my warmest thanks to Ian Gordon of HorrorBabble, who was kind enough to recommend Savage Bites to his army of followers. Thank you so much, Ian. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and I couldn't thank you enough. And to any and all of you who've arrived here via Ian's recommendation, I'm so happy to have you on board. It's really great to have you here. I really hope I can entertain you. I've had an absolutely fantastic week just watching my follower count climb and reading all the lovely comments you guys have been leaving for me, and I find that so inspiring. It's like making me really happy. So thank you guys, thank you for that. And again, of course, thank you Ian for recommending me. It's made such a difference, mate. Thank you so much. Further to that, I'd just like to dedicate this week's episode to a very old friend of mine called Carl Henley, who's sadly no longer with us. He died in a parachute accident 17 years ago, but today, I recorded it today, Saturday 6th of June, and that would have been his birthday, so happy birthday to you, sir, wherever you are, and I shall be raising a little dram to you this evening. This is significant because Carl was the guy who introduced me to War of the Worlds and was really instrumental on starting me off on my horror sci-fi journey many years ago, so thank you, Carl. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.